welcome to the latest broadcast of the Breaking Conservatarian broadcast with your favorite conservatarian, Jeff Charles. And today I have another awesome guest. This is going to be a very enlightening conversation. He hails from the windy city of Chicago, Illinois. He is the CEO and founder of the Dream Exchange. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Joe Cecala. How you doing, brother?
Good to see you, Jeff. Nice to be on the show.
Good. I'm really excited about having you on. This will be probably my first interview that doesn't really have much to do with politics, but I found out about your organization. People reached out to me, and I looked it up, and it's great because this is a subject that I don't know a whole heck of a lot about, but I think that it's something that needs to be talked about more, especially we're in an election season and it's about to end. Yeah, the new year's coming up, and I think that there's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen. So before we get into the Dream Exchange, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to you and your background?
Sure. So I'm 30 years a lawyer, CPA type. One or both of those for the last 30 years, and my better part of my career has really been in small business capital raising, and I was pretty sophisticated in structuring and raising money for small businesses. I guess my claim to fame, or my I guess the highlight of the ventures that I helped in the past was I was the lawyer for the founders of a company called Archipelago. And Archipelago, I mean, it depends on where you are in the country. New Yorkers go, "Oh, Archipelago." The rest of the country goes, "What is that? An island in Greece?"
Yes.
So Archipelago was really the premier and first company in the late 1990s to trade equity stocks over the internet. And by 2005, Archipelago grew to the premier equity trading environment in the world, and the New York Stock Exchange likes to say that they merged with Archipelago, or Archipelago merged with them. Archipelago really took over the New York Stock Exchange in 2005. Electronic capital markets were the wave of the future, and I think that had NYSE not done the transaction with Archipelago, there wouldn't be NYSE. There would just be Archipelago. So,
wow.
It is and to this day, ArcaX is the largest electronic platform for equity securities in the world. My former client, Jerry Putnam, became the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange in 2005. And, I was at the birth of something great. I mean, we raised a little bit of money, and it was 9 people in a little room in Chicago. And, now it is, if you believe Time Magazine, it was one of the top 100 innovations of the 20th century. And it kind of lays in the background. But that's really where my background in capital markets and the national market system, and it's a bit obscure. There's not a lot of people walking around going, "Hey, I helped start a stock exchange." So that's really the foundation of how I got here today. It's got my start with forming that organization in 1996. So that's kind of the background for purposes of letting the listeners know how I'm coming at this. So,
yeah, good. So the Dream Exchange, talk to us about it. Well, what is the Dream Exchange?
So the Dream Exchange is another stock exchange in formation to go along with what I just said. We're not licensed yet. We're under construction, and we intend to build. There's 2 types of exchanges we're building. The first one is what is a conventional, what they call a national market system exchange. And that would be on par with what NYSE and NASDAQ and the other stock exchanges that exist today are. And the second part, which I guess bears a little bit on the political conversations of the day, is we're working very hard on some legislation called the Main Street Growth Act, which has been pending in Congress for a number of years. And in that legislation, a brand new type of stock exchange will be legally entitled to exist, called a venture exchange. And I'm really, I guess that's really the foundation of the Dream Exchange. The idea for it really is born in small capital markets and how the problem that exists in our society today is that electronic stock trading and high volume stock trading is really not something that small companies participate in at all any longer. And it's a little harder for the average investor to get involved in a small company in its earlier stages, and as it expands and grows, to harvest the wealth that comes from, picking a good stock early. Most of the IPOs today are multi-billion-dollar IPOs, and the wealth harvesting is gone to private investors and people long before the public markets see it. So investors like you and I, no one called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to get in really early on Uber or Facebook or Lyft or SpaceX?" And those harvesting of those early stage investments have by and large been had by bigger money investors and venture capitalists. And our goal is to bring more small companies with exciting ideas and innovation to the capital markets sooner, and kind of recreate what was once an ecosystem of small IPOs in our country, we had it for 50 years. We're just in the process of restoring it. So it's really the mechanics.
Just there's something right there. Well, what happened to it? I mean, if this is something that we had for a while and we don't have any more, what happened?
Yeah, that's the answer to the question of why I'm here. So,
okay.
And ironically, not to take responsibility for Archipelago, but and this is all our research. There's a great paper if you're interested in PhD level economic studies. I wrote a white paper, and it's published in Oxford University's Handbook on IPOs. It's chapter 9, and the title of the article is "Low Visibility Markets Acting as Stepping Stones to National Exchanges." So at one time, our country had an ecosystem, and the ecosystem was small companies, very small companies, $50 million and under, and in an IPO environment, that's very small, were 70 to 90% of all annual initial public offerings. And when we published our data on this, you can see that 70 to 90% of all IPOs up until about 2001, we're tiny ones. And then in 2001, it's not like it's a gradual decline. It's a meteoric decline. There's like 4, 3, 7. I mean, the percentage.
So it was more sudden.
It was like the meteor hit Earth and the dinosaurs went extinct. So
wow.
It didn't happen over a long period of time. And so by 2001, no one was screaming, "Oh, there's a problem." But by 2010, after the last economic crisis, there were a lot of scholars. I was going to the SEC, working in their small public company capital formation groups, like what happened to the small IPO. And the Treasury Department actually had a task force called the Ipo Task Force. And they spent a bunch of money researching this. And they published a lot of information, but everyone was blaming increased regulation, which is there's a political topic. If you want to have a political topic, right. So more regulation meant that IPOs are no longer viable, and then so there were some changes to regulation, and the other blame was increased cost. So on two sides of the political aisle, there was it's too expensive, was what kind of the Democrat side of the aisle was arguing. There's too many regulations was what the Republican side of the aisle was arguing. And so there were a lot of changes for nearly 10 years, from 2010 to today, but none of those changes were really addressing the root cause of what happened. And we were very interested in a correct why, because like diagnosing a patient, you get the right cause, you can come up with a solution. So
you want the actual why, not necessarily the political why.
Correct.
Yeah,
and really what we discovered is the incentive for investment banks, for intermediaries, and even for the small companies to go public was really, it was just ruined by the advent of electronic trading. So if you think about it, a $1 billion IPO will have trading volume in its first few days that exceeds the trading volume of a $50 million IPO in 12 months. So why would anyone who makes their money off a trading volume be interested in going through the mechanics of getting that $50 million company public? If you were any business, in any business, if you could earn as much money in 3 days doing one thing as you did for a year doing something else, you simply wouldn't choose that anymore.
Of course.
And so with the advent of a lot of, and there are other, I don't want to totally discount regulation and expense, and there's numerous other collateral things, but the primary reason is because the human interaction in the new company was really, there was a lot of disincentive financially. So having seen this phenomena and researched it and looking at the data, what was really in 2015 or 2014, I'm not exactly sure when, I realized it's market structure, it's capital market structure. So we embarked, we have a great government relations team, and we just started to try to solve that problem with legislation, because it wasn't a regulation, it wasn't the SEC doing it. What we needed was a new type of stock exchange altogether with customized rules so as to re-incentivize the small capital transaction. So there, you know, the NASDAQ was involved in this. There were other exchanges weighing in. There were congressional leadership, and obviously born out of the Treasury study and the Ipo Task Force study. So there was a rudimentary bill crafted in, I want to say 2015, called the Main Street Growth Act. It was badly written, 3 pages. And in 2016,
that's pretty short for legislation.
it was a really short bill. It said, "Hey, venture exchanges can exist. We're not exactly sure what they'll do." So ironically, once again, party lines. 2016, it got out of the House Financial Services Committee on party lines alone. 32 Republicans to 24 Democrats, and got out of committee. But because the research supported, hey, we need something like this, but was it really good? And that's when I really got involved. And I spent probably 8 months of the 2018 year in Washington. And I've probably met 100 members of the House and the Senate and their staffs. And we really lobbied heavily to actually get the mechanics of the law worked out correctly. And so there was an amendment to that. It was an 8-page amendment. We weighed in very heavily on how that amendment should work to satisfy all the considerations: investor protection, market control, how the exchanges would function, what type of securities would be available, when there would be limitations on the size of a company. So it's a $2 billion value and under. So a lot of changes that we were instrumental in helping make. And we got Jeb Hensarling, who was the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, and Maxine Waters and their teams to work out an agreeable amendment. And we met with every member of the House Financial Services Committee. And in 2018, we were able to get the Main Street Growth Act out of the House Financial Services Committee 56-0.
Wow.
Right. Trying to convince a Republican and a Democrat in Congress that water is wet is Herculean. And we have a fairly sophisticated piece of securities legislation that has bipartisan unanimous consent. And it actually went to the floor of the House, and it was 435-0. And it went to the Senate. It was attached to appropriations at the end of 2018. And it was, I think it was 99-0 with one voting that I don't know if they were even there. And we got through appropriations, so we were attached to the year-end spending bill in 2018 with 200 other laws. And if everybody remembers what happened in 2018, the spending war over the border wall occurred, and they shut the government down.
Right.
So when they did that in early 2019, they stripped all attached legislation, and they had a pure spending bill. So we had to start over. So they just passed, here's how much money we're going to spend. All these other laws are tabled. Ironically, it was reintroduced right away, co-sponsored by Republicans and Democrats. It's introduced in the Senate already. It has had hearings in the House again. It's kind of, nobody really is opposing any. The policy behind the law and the politics are well settled. The only problem we've had is, first the Congress went through the impeachment process, which took up a year, and there was never a vote. And with the pandemic this year, it's never really come to a vote. So my hope is that the Main Street Growth Act, which is a great law for our country, there should be not just a dream exchange, but multiple venture exchanges, and all dedicated to the small capital market, the small business owner, and small business capital formation, because it's the backbone of our country. It's where 60% of all of our jobs are in non-publicly listed Fortune 1000s. We're 60% of the workforce comes through the companies we want to help. And so it's a tremendously valuable piece of legislation. And we've written a rule book that is customized to that legislation, so we can operate both a national and a venture exchange when the time comes. So hopefully in 2021, we'll get out of the gates.
Good. So can you explain or give a little deeper dive into what a venture exchange would be?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a customized opportunity for a licensed venture exchange to really control the investing public and how they can participate in what are ostensibly smaller and perhaps more risky, I hate that term, but more risky ventures. Sure. And it's also a customized way to control the trading and the participants in the trading and the small companies that get listed in a way that national exchanges don't pay attention to at all. So the customization of the rules, and I'll give you one example. For example, let's say there's a small company and they raise $10 million in a public setting. Well, that stock is not going to trade very frequently. And if they're in a national exchange environment, well, the rules say that stock must be offered on the national best bid offer system all day, every day. Well, there's nothing damage that can be done, because you have to look at that company. You can't just lump it in with IBM and Apple.
Right.
$100 million company or $100 million balance sheet can't be compared to Apple with $1 trillion balance sheet. So you need a customization of how the trades will be occurring. So one example is the exchange can offer what's called a periodic auction. That company can trade once a week or once a month, and they are allowed to have expanded publication and transparency so that the investors can find out a lot about the small company, and then they only have to be subject to the market fluctuations one day a month or one day a week, because the volume will be lower, and we don't want to hurt those small companies. You can't have some gigantic investment fund that wants to put a bunch of naked short sales across the market. It will run the small company right out of the marketplace. So we get to govern the marketplace in a completely different way. And there are numerous other rules other than the one I just cited that allow exchanges to partner with the companies and the investors to stimulate liquidity. Because here's the key. When you look at the private markets today, I mean, there's a vibrant private investment market in our country. I think there were $12 trillion last year in private investments in our country.
Wow. Okay.
One of the major flaws is that when one makes a private investment, you can't resell your shares. There's no market. You own private company A and it's illiquid. And I suppose you'd have to convince a friend or a business acquaintance and say, listen, I just bought this great company, but I want my $100,000 back because I want to put an addition on my house. Well, if you own IBM, you call your broker or you log into E-Trade and you sell. That doesn't work in the small company environment. You can't resell. There's no liquid market. So what we're doing is we're actually creating a bona fide auction exchange marketplace where the investor can log in, go to his brokerage account, look at Uber before Uber is Uber, and say, wow, I invested at a 1 million or a 5 million or a $20 million valuation. It's now worth 100 million. I have $5 where I had one. I think I'd like to sell now. I'd like to do something else with my money. We're giving that alternative to the investing public, and they are able to harvest the wealth that goes along with those early stage investments. Once again, this was done in the 80s, the 70s. This is 50, 60 years of history in our country of this being done all the time. And like I said, the financial mechanics and financial technology has really made it such a disincentive that the small company IPO doesn't exist anymore. So that's what a venture exchange will be able to do. We can also target our listings. So one of the things we're doing is we have a particular brand, and our brand, first of all, we're focused on the Black community tremendously, because 10 years ago, my merger acquisition firm focused on the Chicago Urban League, and I was raising money for these great Black-owned companies, and had a very tough time doing it. And if we get capital into that environment, I can name off 3 companies that were just a little bit west of Hyde Park and Englewood area. There would be 3,000 or 4,000 jobs with those companies, and one of them is in business. And it's all about capital, okay? Because the ideas are there. These were tremendous and ingenious and successful Black business owners, Harvard pedigreed people. And we're not talking about the corner dry cleaners. These were extremely sophisticated people, and they just didn't have the access or the relationships to raise sufficient capital to put the production-based economic system into the company, in the community that they wanted to put it in. So we see an overarching series of problems that are solved with venture exchanges, the Dream Exchange in particular. One is we've got to get capital into the best ideas in the country. Okay, that's what America's been built on.
Yes,
it's built on innovation. That's our country. We come up with the better mousetrap all the time, and they're usually small companies, and they're early. Before, like I said, before Uber is Uber, before Apple is Apple, we want the public investing in those companies and harvesting the wealth. That's first, good ideas. And then the second part of it is really using all this financial technology to reach the broad investing public, because there's enormous amounts of liquidity in the marketplace. I mean, the Dow is at an all-time high. We have, stock exchanges in America have about $100 trillion a year in trading volume. So we don't need a lot of volume to pump into the small business community. We're not going to be competitively taking away from anybody. But if we can get that money pumped into the small business communities, look, a lot of this social unrest comes from not having a stake in a good company and a good job and a good environment. And if we put that there, look, it may not solve all the problems. I'm not suggesting that we're a panacea for all social ills. But, if you have a good job and a stake in your community, you tend to be a little bit less willing to be antagonistic toward it. And that problem's not been solved. The economic problem has not been solved. And
no, not by a long shot.
Yeah, we're at the forefront of that. That's what we're doing. That's what we're all about at the time.
So let me ask you this, going back to something you said, and when it comes to raising capital for Black communities and I'm sure other minority communities as well, that it was really hard to do that. What were the challenges? I mean, you may name some of them, but what were the main obstacles as far as raising capital for these business owners?
Yeah, I would say the main malfunction, and this goes across the line in almost all of the small business settings that I've worked in, and my whole career is small business. The primary early stage capital that comes into a small business is relationship driven. So if you're in an environment where you have a lot of relationships and you can get a lot of bites at the apple from venture capitalists or high net worth individuals, those very early stage capital advancements let the company expand to a stable point. Well, without those relationships, you tend to suffer. You really have a difficult time expanding. And usually it's been solved, especially in the Black community, it's been solved with, let's get another loan program. And I'm not against borrowing money, but there's a dramatic difference. It's really dramatic between an early stage company that's debt servicing and borrowing a lot of money and one that has a capital partner that's willing to go through the pain of the expansion. And in the Black community, I mean, I did a number of transactions. It was funny because there's one guy who shall go nameless, but he's a wealthy Black investor in Chicago. And after about the third pitch for a different company, he said to me, "Am I the only Black guy with money in Chicago?" You know, and it said, "Well, you're kind of the go-to guy, you know," and that therein lies the problem. It's a numbers problem because there just aren't the number of people with the interest in, you know, delving into that deal in that community. And you know, we've had all kinds of incentives. You know, there's diversity programs and there's hiring programs, and you know, the largest companies in America recently are going to spend a lot of money on diversity. Okay, and they're gonna hire more people, and they're also going to be spending money on minority and women-owned company vendors. Okay,
right.
That's transactional. So that's a transaction. That's okay. We need to order, you know, $100 million worth of computers next year. Let's go through this supplier. And then that supplier has a contract. And for a period of time, the minority company can make some good money. And perhaps they'll even reinvest in their own company. But what we haven't done is put a company there. We haven't invested in that company. We've given them an order. And what we really is the capital to flow in our capital markets into the Black, Asian, and Hispanic communities, especially. I found this to be true in the Hispanic community in Chicago. Worked with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. They had some similar difficulties because, like I said, it's a relationship-driven environment. And it isn't just school chum relationships. This is where the friends and the family and the multiple successful business owners who have spare investment capital to invest in a small company are just, they don't exist in that environment. So how we're going to break the back of that is the companies aren't the problem. These are great companies. I mean, I have a company right now. It's a Black-owned company with a fellow who has a technology to handle computer waste and recycle all of the heavy metals and precious metals and glass out of computer waste and recycle that, resell it. And he's got a job training program to take a 2-year degree or a 2-year associate's degree for people that can start earning the degree as they're going to be work released from prison. So
wow.
Right. Like, talk about a fantastic opportunity, right?
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, and this guy's got every box checked. He's Black, but he's also he's a disabled Army veteran. He was an Army Ranger. I just love this guy. He's been my dear friend for over 10 years. And, you know, I've had a difficult time raising money for his company. If I get him on the Dream Exchange, exactly, your wow is exactly what the American investing public will look at. They'll go, wow, a guy jumped out of airplanes for a living, and now he's running a environmentally sound company that is going to also be a solution for employment for people who are going to have a tough time getting a job. Where do I invest?
What's not to love about that?
What's not to love about that? You know, there are people who would donate their investment, okay, to that type of organization, let alone it has an extremely good business plan to the point where I think they could actually be handling all of the excess and surplus computer waste for the government. One of the biggest organizations that generates computer waste is the federal government. And what they do with the waste right now,
they just generate a lot of waste, period. they waste just everything.
I was walking the thin line on the politics up until that moment.
I just had to throw some red meat out there.
Totally fine. I like mine kind of rare, so I'll eat that every day. Yeah. Yeah, the government puts the computer waste in airplane hangars. They can't throw it in a landfill because it's toxic and against the law. So they just store it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's millions of dollars of revenue to this guy. But we got to build his company up. I have dozens of examples just like that. I mean, and we've only just begun. I mean, there are probably 1,000 companies that could be listed on the Dream Exchange and generate investment dollars. So we're a kind of a blend of all things. We have a lot of sophistication from my background in financial markets and financial technology. So we know how to build the mechanics of a national best bid, best offer electronic stock exchange. But we're going to use that and target specific candidates to be listed using the venture exchange legislation to go after this kind of what I want to call low-hanging fruit. Now imagine getting to invest in that at an early stage, and when that company's worth $200, $300, $500 million, you've really got some wealth to harvest. So that's, I don't know if I answered your question. I got on a little tangent there, but that's really the direction of the exchange and how it, and this is a very mechanical, like I have some very lofty goals and purposes to the Dream Exchange, but the fact is that we don't even have to talk philosophy. We can really just talk mechanics and the workability of the mechanics in both the legislation and in the actual business evaluations quantitatively produces investment returns and healthy companies, and it helps the country in a tremendous way. So that's really what we're up to for the most part.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what I'm hearing you say is that one of the biggest obstacles, especially to minority business owners who need capital, is the fact that they don't necessarily have all of the relationships they need to attract investors. But through the Dream Exchange, you kind of get around that by providing investors and business owners, entrepreneurs, with a way to connect so that they can get that capital without having to have been born into certain relationships or been, just however it happens, just privy to having all of the right connections.
Exactly.
Would that be fair to say? Or
that's exactly right. I mean, when we did our branding about 5 years ago, and we had a tremendous, the lady who did our branding is Cheryl Berman, and she owns a small company called Unbundled, but she was the CEO and chief creative officer of Leo Burnett. So she's an icon in America. She represented Disney and McDonald's, and her team is the team that came up with the phrase "You deserve a break today."
Okay.
Yeah, she's extraordinary. And by survey, the single word that was the top word about all of our business plans and models and everything, the senior most word was access. So how does the business owner get access to investors? And for the investors, how do the investors get access to these early stage companies that they don't even know exist and at the earliest possible stage? So access is our battle cry, is getting people connected. Actually, we have I don't know if you're gonna ask about this later, but we have a kind of what I consider to be a social media software. So we're not open. So how could we help people today was our primary focus in 2019. And I thought, access. So we developed a software. It's a social media for small businesses and small business investors and intermediaries called DreamX Connect. And it's genuinely a social media. So a company can go in, and it's a menu-driven free software. So like you go on Facebook and you pull down a menu and it says, where did you go to school and where did you, work and what's your marital status? And it's all kind of all the fields and menu is driven to give you a profile. Well, we've done exactly the same thing for a small business. So all the menus are, have you had investors? What round are you at? What value do you think you are? What industry are you in? What products do you have? And it's all menu driven so that they can formulate a really nice professional looking profile for their business.
Okay.
Investors, venture capitalists, and the investment side can do exactly the same thing, menu driven. And then they're allowed to communicate on a social media messaging board. So we've already had some successes where companies are getting connected to strategic partners and investors, and it's all free. And it's just a community of like-minded people who are trying to get access to one another.
Right.
In a social media way. So, and it just generates exactly what we're looking for so that at some point when we're ready to open, the candidates that will want to be the applicant for a listing on the exchange will be harvested in this social media environment that we're creating. So we're already doing that. I think we've had that for about maybe a little more than 2 months. We have 500 companies. We have over 500 investors in there, some intermediaries. People are already connecting. There's one investor, strategic partner that already partnered and they're doing a deal. All that's done offline,
That's awesome.
but yeah, someone analogized it to a dating site for entrepreneurs.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Or like just like it's almost like that software will be like a friend introducing somebody that they're connected to somebody else. Like, there's always that guy that always has the hookup or always knows somebody
Right.
that could do what you want them to do. And it sounds like this is that friend
Yeah,
for
exactly.
business owners looking for investors and vice versa.
Yeah, dedicated to exactly that, without it being some sounding board to make your personal views known or all that. That's fine. There's
Right.
social media platforms for that everywhere, or LinkedIn, which was, I think LinkedIn started out as a executive recruiting software, and it's become social media for business people. Well, this is really much more dedicated to how do I get access to business help, both as an investor and as a small company, and it's going well. I mean, we haven't done any promotion whatsoever. We had one press release this summer. We've had over 1 million visits to our website through the press release.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is an idea whose time has come. It's very clear we're onto something. We're onto something right. And
Yeah, honestly, I'm surprised that somebody hasn't done this already.
I
mean, I'm sure some have.
What's funny is the questions I was getting early on is exactly that. So why hasn't someone done this already? And I think there's a number of reasons that it hasn't been done. First of all, starting a stock exchange isn't like rolling off a log. It's a sophisticated business.
Sure.
On the other hand, I just don't think there's been the interest. I don't think the awareness of the problem has been quite so pronounced. And now that we've had this pandemic, it's now flowing. So before the pandemic, I felt like I was trying to push a golf ball through a garden hose. It was just hard.
Mhm.
Now I feel like I'm trying to drink from a fire hose because there's just so much. Weekly I'm on podcasts and media, and we're doing webinars, and the inflow of people who want to support what we're doing is quite tremendous. So, now that it's out there, and I think it's needed, we need a production-based economic system for small business.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, if a lot of people aren't really interested in this or interested in doing what you're doing, what motivated you to do this? I mean, how did this come about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I owned a law firm, and I did a lot of transactions. I really stopped practicing law in 2006, and
Okay.
because I realized that I started to pare down why do people call me? What is it that people are looking for when they call me as a lawyer? And I began to realize they really weren't calling me as a lawyer at all. They were calling me as a business person who could really look through the legal documents and come up with, is this a viable business plan? Is the due diligence on my company correct? And does the idea merit making an investment? So I was always representing investors. And, I did a lot of transactions, and I didn't just pick right. I pointed out the characteristics and the deficiencies in such a way that I thought, if I standardize that as a business professional, I'll get more people that want and need my help. They can go to any law firm and have contracts drafted. But the specialty was, what are the characteristics of the company? What is its valuation? How do we put this all together to make soup? So I began working on that in the late 2006. Then the bottom fell out of the economy. And that's when I really started going, well, why aren't the public capital markets supporting small business? And that's when we went, all of us, when I say us, there's kind of a cadre of people in this environment that looked at it and said, we didn't even know that the 50 million and under IPO market had collapsed and it was dead. And it stayed that way for 20 years. That's when I started the research on why did that happen? Yeah. And so then the research turned into the white paper, and the white paper turned into the solution. And for the last 5 years, the solution has always been married to let's we don't have a capitalist society. We also clearly don't have a socialist society. We do have a government that bestows benefits. There's unemployment benefits, and there are mechanisms to help people in their time of need, which is not pure capitalism, right? And capitalism in its purest sense is if you didn't produce anything today, you don't get anything.
Completely
So
fair.
we have a kindness in our society that is appropriate. On the other hand, no one in our society wants to produce something and get less than a fair day's wage for a fair day of work. And so what I began to realize was behind everything that I did were company owners who had ideas. So if your idea is better and more worthy and more capable than someone else's, well, that's generally colorblind. And I began to see it because I couldn't raise money for better ideas in the Black community. And I went, okay, there's something's mechanically wrong with a society that wants to prosper, that wants the American dream, that wants to make more money, and we're not actually in communication with one another. There's no mechanism. And that's where the dream exchange and using capital markets to solve the economic problem was born. And it goes back close to 10 years, but I don't want to call it 10 years. It's probably more like 5. And then this spring, we were already partnering with Black private equity firms, and we have a number of minority investors, and so we were always headed in that direction. And we were making those partnerships over the winter, and it was ironic to me because I've been shouting this problem for 10 years from the top of any tower anyone would give me. And then we had this kind of society changing event at the end of May, and the incident happened with George Floyd, and we became relevant. I've been relevant on this for 10 years, but people went, wait a minute, what's wrong? What's actually occurring? And I've analogized it to this. It's a very interesting observation that I'm having, and it's a little bit on the edge, but I think I'm leaning towards articulating it correctly. And it is the fact that there's a disenfranchisement that's been so long and so deep in our society that there's a segment of society that just doesn't care anymore. They've gone hopeless, and it's now big. It's now it's undeniable that look, a major United States city was basically almost occupied this year in Seattle. They took over a city, and I'm a Sicilian kid from the west side of Chicago. Okay, when I grew up, my grandfather was born in Sicily. We weren't allowed to watch the movie The Godfather when I was a child. It was like my grandfather in broken English say, why do I want to watch a movie about a Sicilian? I've been Sicilian my whole life. So
it's funny you say that because when I was a kid, my mom wouldn't let me watch good movies. So
right.
like a lot of those movies, everybody else has seen it. I haven't seen them because I wasn't allowed, and now I'm an adult. So I feel kind of stupid watching them now.
Yeah, I was an adult watching The Godfather for the first time, and there were all these insights and lines that I'd heard my whole life, and like, oh, that makes sense now. I just watched the movie, but there was a part of the movie that I think bears upon today. There's art imitates life. There's a lot of really interesting, I guess, morality plays inside those movies, which have made them last for so long. And the one thing I recognized about today was this: that there's a scene in one of the movies where I think it's the Al Pacino character. He's in Cuba, and the captain of the guard is blown up by a suicide bomber of the Cuban police, and he watches it happen, and he's concerned about being a part of anything in Cuba after that. and he's telling the other gangster, listen, I'm a little concerned. There's these rebels in Cuba. And the other guy says, what are you worried about? They're rebels. And he said, no, I saw someone today commit suicide only to take out the captain of the guard. And the other gangster asks him, well, why do you think that's important? And he answers, because it's a sign that they can win. And the fact is,
I remember that. Yeah.
right? And so there's an insight there. Like I said, art imitates life. And when you're seeing what's happening, there's a certain, I guess, counter intention to what has been a given to us, the American dream. Don't you want to become wealthy and have a nice home and have a nice family and have a community and have prosperity and live in a free country and live in America? Well, there are a growing number of people who are very angry, and they don't see that the American dream is a possibility for themselves at all.
Yeah. That's been a problem it's an age-old problem in this country. You're right.
It's probably a several 100-year-old problem.
Yeah.
And the reason it's a several 100-year-old problem is, I think, and this is what I think, we're very relevant today. What made us get 1 million people in the last 3 months is we're actually touching upon the earliest cause, which is economic disenfranchisement. If you don't have the hope of sharing in equity, if owning something, of becoming someone who's actually building wealth and prosperity and generational wealth and having that opportunity available to you, you can, the American dream is not your dream, someone else's. And it's ironic. My company's the Dream Exchange. That's what we're all about. And we're actually, ironically, long before this year's civil unrest, I was screaming, look, we have to get the geniuses of our society, the people with great ideas and the people who want to make a difference and can build big companies from all walks of life, from every obscure corner that they may come from. We've got to get them to participate, and we've got to invest in them so that they can expand. 92% of all jobs are created after a company goes public. So if you have a company that has 100 employees, when it goes public, it grows to 1,000 employees. Okay, so that's a statistic from the Department of the Treasury's Ipo Task Force.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, listen to this one. We've had stock exchanges in our country. Philadelphia Stock Exchange was the first one in 1790, I believe. New York Stock Exchange, 1817. 230 years we've had stock exchanges in America. We've had one Black-owned company on the New York Stock Exchange in 230 years.
Are you serious?
Yes, sir. One.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. I did not. I'm not surprised about that, but it's just something that I haven't really thought about. Just one. Wow.
Exactly. So now think about job creation happens after the public capital markets support a company. We have no public companies in a community where 13% of the population is Black. Okay, so how is it possible to have a share in wealth building, wealth creation, economic prosperity, communities, jobs? How is it possible that we're going to create any degree of parity or equity or ownership of the fabric of what it is to be a free American if we don't start investing in the people and the human beings who are really trying to make a difference in the country? And I'm just not a quitter, so I could have done something else and made more money in my career. That's for sure. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been building the Dream Exchange while working. In the last 3 years, it's been nothing but the Dream Exchange. I've often said you're not an entrepreneur until you put your payroll on your credit cards at least once. Okay. And those are the people that, have great ideas. We have to get investment capital into the communities. We have to do that.
So, okay. So man, there's so many questions I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I had something I was going to ask, but like you're just giving me more to ask. So you're building the Dream Exchange. I mean, it's not. I mean, you have the social media aspect of that,
Mhm.
but what has to happen before it's a reality? Is it this legislation that you're waiting on, the Main Street Act, or are there other factors that are preventing you from starting right now, or are you just kind of going through the process and it's going to happen, at a
Yes.
certain period? Or
Oh yeah, good question. So we're building simultaneously two uh, discrete stock exchanges that are going to be owned by the Dream Exchange. One is the Dream Exchange National Exchange, which will be exactly comparable and in competition with the 18 other stock exchange licenses that exist. And there's really only about five. There's the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, the BATS Exchange, the CBOE, and the Investors Exchange, and a brand new exchange that just opened called the Members Exchange, and the Long-Term Stock Exchange. So there's seven that are operating in America today. Okay.
okay,
They're what's called a national stock exchange. Their volume of buying and selling of stocks are the celebrity who's who of corporate America. And they make their money on trading volume, where the buying and selling happens. The New York Stock Exchange has about $52 trillion a year in trading volume. They make a fraction of a penny on that volume. They may make billions of dollars on the buying and selling of others. If the market goes up and there's high volume, they make money. If the market goes down and there's high volume, they make money.
right,
So we're building an exchange just like that. And we're also building a venture exchange. Now, why both? So a stock exchange is merely a set of rules by which the buying and the selling of stocks takes place.
okay,
So our national exchange rulebook, when we present that to the SEC in 2021, is going to have criteria for a company to list its shares of stock on the exchange. Now, this is another little known factor. I do these webinars. Even financial professionals are somewhat unaware of this fact.
hmm
A company registers its stock with the government, with the SEC.
right,
That registration statement does not automatically entitle that company to list its shares on a stock exchange. You have to apply to be listed on the exchange, and you have to meet criteria to be listed. So, for
okay,
example, the New York Stock Exchange today, you need a $250 million valuation, minimum valuation, to be considered as a listing candidate for NYSE. Well, clearly there are going to be no $50 million deals. So by definition, they're not even doing them. So what our national exchange is going to do is we're going to target a much smaller company, albeit above 50 million, but smaller.
okay,
Now, the venture exchange does require the legislation. A national exchange, all we have to do is build our infrastructure, create our rule book, make sure that we're compliant with all the laws, apply for our license, and we'll be a stock exchange. That's just a matter of doing the mechanics and the work which we're working on now. So the quote unquote pipes are being built as we speak.
okay, okay,
So that can happen regardless of the legislative process. That's just a track of doing the project of doing that. The Main Street Growth Act getting passed opens up an enormous new set of possibilities, because it's a separate stock exchange owned by the same company, and we'll be able to really target listings of stock for very small companies, $10 million, $5 million companies. And our intention is to restore the ecosystem to the American capital markets, where the small company comes to the venture exchange with its specialized rules, and it kind of incubates there, and it expands and it grows. And as it reaches a certain threshold, then it graduates to a national exchange and the entire.
okay,
So the business plan involves doing both. Obviously, one element of it is we really would like to see this legislation, which has already fundamentally passed both parties. So it's not like It's a matter of when, not whether, I think, for the legislation. So that part of the
Yeah, it
business,
sounds like it's already been litigated and everybody's on board with it. It's just a
yeah,
matter of
everybody likes
getting
it.
through Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the two major plans that we have and major initiatives that we work on. We're a small but mighty team. We have 12 full-time staff. We have about 20 altogether with people who will onboard once we're more operational. And then I think when we open, we'll top out at we only need about 50 employees to really launch.
Hmm.
And, I think NASDAQ has 4,000 employees. So clearly we'll be much smaller.
Right.
And the environment is smaller. We don't need a lot of $100 trillion of trading volume to be a very successful stock exchange. But the key is we're channeling our profitability into the underserved areas of the country, because I believe, I'm making this bet on my future, I believe that if we properly cultivate those companies and those business geniuses, that's where the value of the exchange and its expansion is going to come from. We can't count on being the national treasure that is the New York Stock Exchange. It's truly, look, without the United States capital markets for the last 100 years, innovation for mankind would be missing. We've
Right.
paid for this. I often say, if you look at 1900, if you wanted to go to the market, you had to get out of your house and get in a horse and a buggy. And
Right.
virtually every person gets in a climate-controlled vehicle, many of them electronic. And we've changed the way we live on the planet, and all that invention and all that ingenuity and all that engineering and all of the ability to create leisure and survival in our society as a species has been bought and paid for in the United States capital markets. We have funded a transformation in humanity on Earth in a way that in the thousands of years we've been in existence on the planet has never been done before. And what we're losing is funding the ingenious early ideas. And that is scary to me. Okay. That is the thing that,
Right.
I think that rock and roll and Coca-Cola did more to end the Cold War than half of our military. And I served in the military, so it's not a slam on the military, but
Right. Right.
the Soviet Union wanted Coke. They wanted Coca-Cola and choices of beverages, and they wanted they wanted to hear Billy Joel. So we have to stay on top of our game and what makes our country great. And what makes our country great is all of the amazing people and the amazing ideas. And they come from all walks of life. They come from all areas, all circumstances. And if we stop paying for those ideas, our society is in trouble. So that's the overarching philosophy of the Dream Exchange. I talked about the mechanics, but I think philosophically, I'm onto the fact that we survive better when we invest our money in things that help us to survive better. Whatever you invest in, you get more of. If you invest in drugs, you'll get more drugs. If you invest in,
Right.
pedigree puppies, you'll get more pedigree puppies. Whatever the money goes to, you get more of. So our philosophy is to find the innovative company that has the best idea that will expand our ability to survive, and let's give our money to that company through the investment in capital markets. And what we'll get is more survival. We'll get an expansion of our prosperity and our ability to survive kind of in a more peaceful, prosperous world. So that's the philosophy of our company.
Yeah. And when you were talking, I was thinking, 20 years with small businesses not having it be easy for them to go public and get that funding. What have we been missing out on as far as innovation and ideas? That's crazy. I never even knew that was an issue. And especially, when it comes to minority communities. And now, so the Dream Exchange, it's minority owned, or is it more tailored towards minorities as far as clientele, or both, or?
Both. So we have our lead investors. So we have a number of minority investors and minority private equity that's come in. Some of it's still coming in. And so that when we're finished with all the capital, there'll be a majority ownership will be minorities. And that was by design. And actually, that actually was by design long ago, because I thought, this is a time for me, long before, like I said, I've been shouting this from the ramparts. I had to put my money where my mouth is. I was the founder, so at the beginning, I owned everything. We have about 100 investors right now, and there's a window of opportunity. We're still taking some accrediteds for a period of time, and then we're expecting some larger tranches of capital coming in the early part of next year. So yes, it will be a majority owned Black company. The first majority owned stock exchange in the history of our country is how we're saying it. And then, but in addition to that, long before we had the capital coming in the way it is, we were dedicated to, this kind of free and underserved marketplace. And in particular, I've been working, my predecessor firm was working with the Black community for, a decade to kind of solve that. I think if there is a systemic problem, we talk about systemic problems in our country.
Right.
I think by and large, this is a system. Okay. What are the systems? For something to be systemic, there has to be a system that operates in a way that is not working. And this is an economic system of capital that has not worked. It's been broken. And we are a solution to that. And it transcends race to some degree, because it's all underserved markets. There are a lot of other marketplaces where if you look at both racial, ethnically, as well as certain sciences. Ironically, there are medical sciences that don't receive capital because they are not they're not the highest rate of return medical science. So if someone has a cure for a cancer, for example, actually we provided this information for the congressional record. There's a great professor from MIT who supported us in this information. When someone has a cure for cancer, they can get a lot of investment dollars. And the reason is that there are so many other collateral potential ways to make money with treatments, either directly addressing a cancer or directly addressing immune illnesses and other things that come out of that research. Cancer gets a lot of research. But we have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Very few dollars go into the research to cure one of the most deadly diseases that has been around for decades. Why is that? It's because there is only one purpose to that investment. And if you aren't actually curing ALS, then the rate of return of that investor for that particular illness will not get capital. Now, I think that's a tragedy, because there are laboratories, in fact, there's medical parks in the country who count on donations for research into these what are considered to be rare illnesses. Well, if we have a capital market and we have a company and they're solely dedicated to ALS, and they can actually make money, or they can be a biopharma company like many of the biopharma companies, and people invest in them and they sit on their investment for 15 years until they get through phase 3 FDA trials, and then they have a drug and they're willing to wait. Why? Because the return of having that solution for our survival is so enormous that they're willing to wait 15 years in some other biopharma environment. So what we're trying to do is change the paradigm of investing altogether and say, look, let's just look at it a different way. And when we look at it a different way, you can see that, an organic food manufacturing company in Englewood in Chicago should get investment dollars. A Black-owned, and that's a true story again, couldn't raise money for that company. And its procurement, they would be huge. They had contracts from McDonald's and the Department of Defense, and they just couldn't fulfill because they couldn't raise a sufficient amount of equity, long-term equity. And the borrowing wasn't going to help them because they'd run out of time on the borrowing and they have to debt service. So we're shifting that paradigm. At least we're announcing the shift, and I think we're early adopting, and I think the market is going to catch up to us and rather quickly, at least by way of the website responses we're getting. And they're not just your average folks. We're getting a lot of support from fairly celebrity, I could name the names of government officials, as well as world of finance people who are very interested in what we're doing, because we're interested and we've been working on it a long time. So I guess we're first. And so I'm not even sure what question I was answering, but I'm enjoying the conversation.
No, I mean, I'm learning a ton just from listening to you. So let's see. So, okay, so going back to the social media aspect of this, what was the name of the platform that you built?
DreamX Connect. It's Dream EX, not just X. So DreamX Connect is the social media platform. That's actually our website. Our website is dreamx.com.
DreamX.
Right.
Okay.
And the social media is DreamX Connect. You can reach it you go to the website. There's a link to DreamX Connect through the website.
Oh yeah, you know what? I think when I was looking you guys up, I think I stumbled on it and I thought it was something else. I was like, oh no, this isn't the right thing, but apparently it is. So
yeah,
I'll check it out more. So as far as, I mean, I know you don't know about a timeline as far as the venture market because you have to wait for that legislation and who knows how long that'll take. But when it comes to the more national organization that you're building, I know you're still laying the infrastructure. Do you have a timeline on that as to when that will be ready to go?
I think we're realistically, we're between, ambitiously, we're under 12 months, but between 12 and 14 months is probably a really good time frame. One of the critical things for the national exchange is making sure that the electronic infrastructure can be stress tested by the SEC and be flawless. Everything we've done is state of the art. So like I said, our branding was done by, the top branding person in the world. Our government relations is head up by former Congressman Marty Russo. He was in Congress for 20 years, and he was the top lobbyist for Cassidy and Associates for 20 years. He's just a very, very, very sane, very influential, both sides of the aisle man, and he's been running government relations. Our research area is headed up by a professor whose name is Ioannis Floros. He's an endowed chair now, I believe, at the University of Wisconsin. He's an up and coming. I believe that at some point his work is kind of Nobel laureate quality. He's an extraordinary researcher. So he's the head of our research area. We have former applications programmers who built national exchange order books for at least 2 other stock exchanges. So our technology area is state of the art. So everything I'm doing, I want to be it has to be flawless as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that this is not an at bat in baseball where we're going to see 3 strikes. We want to hit a home run on the first pitch.
Right.
To give you my favorite sports analogy. So that's how we've approached everything. So if it takes a little longer to make it closer to perfect, I'm willing to bear with perfection over let's hurry up and do this. And it gives us some time to do what I'm doing right now, which is we've only begun in the last 90 days getting the message out. So we have a year-long, let's build the grassroots support. Let's get our message out. Let's start showing people our true intentions and build the support network in our society for what we're doing. Now that we've built the scholarly case, we've built the governmental case, we've built the marketing case, and we have the technology case built. Now what we're doing is launching a major media and marketing campaigns that will start, after the first of the year, to make the public aware of what you're being surprised by on the call. Like, people just don't know.
Yeah, no, they don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a presumption. What's in my 401k, it went up or down, and they watch television and they see the Dow Jones Industrial Average and they assume that somehow is the New York Stock Exchange. No, that's all stock exchanges. The Dow is traded across all exchanges today. So there's a difference between capital market structure that is what a stock exchange does, and capital market investing, which is what JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Vanguard and Fidelity and all these other sources of funds are doing. And we're going to change the structure to accommodate more of the American investing and corporate public to open the freedom of the American capital markets in an area that has never before really seen help like the help we're trying to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're democratizing access. I mean, for investors and for minority business owners.
That is a wonderful expression. I was in a meeting in.
You can have that one for free.
Well, so it's very interesting. I'll send you $1 every time I use it. But the funny part is the person who actually labeled the democratization of finance was Elizabeth Warren. We were in a meeting with her staff, and she came by and poked her head in, and her staff member described what we were doing, and she said, "Oh, great! It sounds like the democratization of finance." And I thought, wow, I'm not sure I want to publicize that because I don't want to be controversial, but it really is the free and open market system. I think John F. Kennedy had a great quote. He said, "A nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth or falsity of ideas in a free and open market is a nation that is afraid of its people."
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just not afraid of any business owner. I will really celebrate the business owner successes regardless of where they come from, or what color they are, or what segment of society. I just want the best ideas, and I want people to have a good environment to have a job and to work for a company they care about. My father was a city worker. My dad worked for the CTA for 41 years, and never finished high school, was a World War II vet, one of those generation. And he was always fascinated by the idea that people worked for companies and somehow took more stock, or not literal stock, but there was an affinity that the people in our environment had for working for a company that he loved what he did. He worked for the CTA, and he loved the people he worked with, but he knew the CTA and the buses would run and the trains would run long after he was dead and gone. But it's not that way with a company. You can really become invested, and I've worked in corporate America, and you become invested in what the company's products are.
Right.
So, I got to. He gave me the opportunity to do that. My parents were they were pretty vigilant. There was not an option of choosing something other than college and working hard. So I just would love that opportunity to exist for every single person in our country. And we're really putting our shoulder into this to push it through in 2021 to see that start happening again.
Great. Awesome. Well, we're getting to the end here, but I mean, there was so much in what you were saying. But last question would be, if there's one thing that I didn't ask, or one thing that you think the audience needs to know about what you're doing, what would that be?
Oh, wow. You were great. I did a lot of talking, so I covered a lot of ground. I would say this. The one thing I would say is, if the audience are the entrepreneurs in particular, or the small business owners. The one thing I really want to communicate to the small business community is never quit. Um, the Dream Exchange is about that. You just, no matter how difficult, no matter how many creditors are coming to bear on you, or how many people tell you you have a stupid idea, or how many Shark Tank interviews you have where they tell you your idea is worthless. You just The environment that I thrive in is validating the small business owner, because it's hard. It's hard to build a small business and to own
Yes.
your own stake in our society. And every now and again, you just have to hear someone say that. And if I'm the person who has to say it, you just keep your integrity, but never, ever, ever quit. Don't ever give up on your dreams. And that's if there's any one thing, if I had a tombstone and, they have born and died, I just want my tombstone to have my name on it and just say he never quit. And I that's the message. If I can get that out to more people, especially with the pandemic and with all the social unrest and apparency that we're at odds with one another, just keep going, keep pushing hard, and don't give up hope, and just never quit at what you're trying to do. And that's what will make our whole country work again. Is we just have to keep working really hard, never quitting, to cooperate with one another and build a more compassionate and kind and prosperous society. So that would be the overarching message that I think the Dream Exchange. I hope it's communicating that long after I'm dead and gone.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Well, so go ahead and let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, so the dreamex.com, DREAMEX.com is our website. And in there, there's routes to everything. There's routes to, we have introductory products that you can click on and get very sophisticated help for almost no money. We have very introductory products. It's thousands, not tens of thousands of dollars to pay for it. DreamX Connect is free. And we do any grassroots help with the bill. If you're interested in that, our website has a link so that you can communicate with your congressman or your senator to support the Main Street Growth Act. And as I articulated before, we have a very limited window for some people to invest between now and perhaps early next year. We're still interviewing people. We've been very selective, but there's a route on our website at dreamex.com is where you can reach us.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and hopefully sometime next year we can talk more about your progress. And I'm sure there's a wealth of information that you have in your brain. So I want to pick it a little bit more at some point.
For sure. Yeah, we have a bunch of webinars on the website too. So there's educational webinars, and so I'd be happy to have my brain picked again. And this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay.